And here we go, Mr. Cullen. Another Friday, another deep dive into the bizarre information and data that's presented to the people of the United States of America by the various corrupt public health organizations. How are you today, John?
I'm well, thank you. That's quite the graphic you put together for tonight's show.
Yeah,
Quite,
well,
quite remarkable.
right. Thank you. We're going to be talking about some of the food processing plants around the United States that have been affected by this coronavirus outbreak, whether it is the news that's causing employees to not want to be there or an actual and authentic viral outbreak. For whatever reason, we're hearing multiple reports that food processing plants all over the United States of America are closing, resulting in increased food prices, reduced availability. This is a volatile and dangerous combination. Obviously, not being able to access food would be an extremely serious concern.
Indeed. And, what we're seeing is outbreaks of coronavirus at not only the Smithfield plant. I think a bunch of people have heard about the Smithfield processing plant. I forget if it's in South Dakota or somewhere, but that had been in the news quite a bit. And when you start to investigate further, it turns out that we've seen COVID-19 meat plant closures at a number of places beyond just Smithfield. And the audience may or may not know that Smithfield is owned by a Chinese company. And so what we're going to take a look at is what is this correlation here between um, abattoirs, slaughterhouses basically, and coronavirus. And
Yeah.
and it's not just in the United States, it's also in Germany. So leave that tab up as well. We're going to look at Germany, we're going to look at Australia. And the question is, wait a second, is this thing spreading through the food supply? Because if the outbreaks are happening at the abattoirs and it's in the chicken and it's in the pork and everybody who's working in these places is sick, might we need to spend a little bit more time investigating these abattoirs and slaughterhouses? So that's what tonight's show is for patrons only. We're going to look at data, right? Like we typically do. So we're going to drill in, look at a bunch of different stories around the country. We're going to look in Brooklyn. We're going to look in the Dakotas. We're going to look in Germany, Australia, etc. And when you start, again, it's weaving the story together. It's trying to figure out this different aspects of the story. And when I see these patterns, and I'm not the only one who sees it, obviously these people were writing stories about it. But again, it's not in the mainstream media. Rachel Maddow's not talking about this. So we need to thread this stuff together, and we need to do it on a global basis. Meaning, most of the stories you're going to hear about are going to be about just in the States. But I'm hearing about Germany. I'm hearing about Australia. I'm hearing about slaughterhouses in Brooklyn.
Hmm.
Uh,
Well, let me
so
ask
we
you
need
this,
to we
John.
need to look at that. Sure.
Yeah, because I mean, this is just the first actually thing that came up when I put in food processing plants closing. This is an article, meatandpoultry.com, not a website that I'm necessarily visiting that often, but I guess it's an industry website. They've got this, I mean, I think you know where I'm going. This is certainly very reminiscent of what is this data wrapper? Is this the thing that they use for the coronavirus map as well?
No, this is different, but it is a visualization tool. So it's a way of taking data that's in a spreadsheet, adding the geographic coordinates, the zip codes or what have you, the state names, and then showing it in a GIS manner. So
What's GIS mean?
you're a geographic information system. So you're
Ah.
on the right track, you're in the right realm, but it's not the same company.
Now,
Different
wait a
company,
minute. So,
different tool.
okay, so this says it's going to resume. I mean, this is another thing that it's like, what are they just trying to make us panic? I just rolled over the first thing. It said it's going to resume in May. This says it was updated June 26th, which is just last week,
hmm
but yet I can't tell. +2, is that good or bad? Like, what are we looking at here?
Again, you're seeing a lot of examples of poorly designed software that doesn't communicate the real story well. And we've seen example after example of that. And that's why my experience in this realm of seeing past the lousy software design to get into the real data has been an asset, right? So
Yeah.
just, it's fortuitous or serendipitous or however you want to look at it that I know a little bit about this stuff. So the poor design doesn't really slow me down too much. But
Right.
again, what you're going to see here, there's a number of aspects in the story tonight for the patron only hour. And that is how many of these abattoirs in the United States are Chinese owned.
Huh.
And
Yeah.
that's going to blow everybody's mind. So
Wow.
that's what we're going to get into that tonight. But before we get to the patron only hour, I know we only have maybe 20 minutes left or even less than that. There's a bunch of stuff that I prepared for tonight for the YouTube show. It's follow up from previous research that we've been doing. And I don't like to just put stories out there and not follow up. I like to follow up on the stories and see. So last week we proposed a mechanism to make the economy great again. And in the YouTube, we've got the president is supporting bigger direct coronavirus payments. So it seems that the president recognizes and embraces that America is going to need some more help and more support. And I think that the program that you and I discussed last week on our patron only hour directs that support where it's needed. And where it's not needed, money's not wasted. And I think that that's an important distinction. And so I encourage anybody who has any connections to the, excuse me, to the administration or what have you, to consider this alternate approach, which is that people who need help are granted help, and people who do not need help don't ask for it. And therefore, we're not sending money to people who are not in need, right? And then the money that we do send to people, it doesn't necessarily have to be a handout. It can be a very attractive loan. And that's what we talked about last week in our patron only hour. So again, the president here in this article, this is from Breitbart, and the president says, he supports more support going to the American people. I don't know if they want to send another $1,200 check to everybody in the country again, or almost everybody. But I think there's a better way to prime the economy to rescue small businesses, rescue large businesses. We might be able to rescue Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just concerned that this is kind of like creeping socialism where everybody gets used to just kind of like hanging out in their house or going and blowing off fireworks and busting up statues and getting these checks. I would prefer to see them kind of provide some scientific evidence as to what exactly is going on and then make a sensible decision. But we haven't seen that yet, and it's quite disappointing. Some of the people in the comments are saying that even if there is coronavirus in chicken or beef or whatever, so when you cook it at 300, 400 degrees, it's going to kill it.
You would think so. And again, we're going to explore that. Why is it so prevalent in these abattoirs? Then we talked about this last week, which is it appears that Dr. Fauci's H1N1 flu, which we call it that because he resurrected it in 2005. So at Walter Reed, this is the H1N1 that was resurrected. And now we're seeing a new outbreak of what, again, they've managed to call swine flu again, even though it's H1N1. And they gave it a new name. And the new name is G4EA H1N1.
Scarier.
And
it's a genetic mix.
It's a genetic mix. Basically, it's the grandchildren, right? It's the fourth generation of mutations of the H1N1, right? So take the version that Dr. Fauci let out of the bottle in 2005,
Yeah.
right? Then we had the flu pandemic in 2009. And well, what do you think this virus has been doing since 2009? Mutating, right? So they found this new mutated little cousin, and basically it's like Gremlins Returns, you know. Here we go again. You know, it's the grandchildren of H1N1.
Don't feed it
And
after midnight.
yeah, but the issue here is that you and I have been spending weeks looking at how the World Health Organization has stopped tracking H1N1 currently. So the
Well, not
fact
only
that they're
that, we've
even,
also discussed how they made a conscious decision to resurrect the Spanish flu.
well, that was first base. That's Dr. Fauci and the team at National Institute of Health and the CDC while working at Walter Reed right before they shuttered Walter Reed. So this was sort of the last project. They resurrected the H1N1 virus, which was the most deadly virus known to man. I mean, this is a wicked, wicked virus. And they decided that in the best interest of the public health, they would resurrect it.
It's
Well,
stunning.
4 years later, we had an outbreak. But what's interesting about the outbreak that happened in 2009 is that Tamiflu was ready and waiting. They were already talking. It's like this sophisticated awareness of this stuff that your audience, your investigative journalists, your family of journalists, this didn't exist back in 2009. People weren't doing this type of crowdsourced
Yeah,
investigation
true.
with so many people participating. And, again, we've got nurses and doctors and stuff in our comments section telling us, what's happening with tests and what's happening in the hospitals. So Dr. Fauci and these guys decide they're going to resurrect this thing. 2009, it gets out. We have an outbreak. And the World Health Organization declares a global pandemic. And only 12,000 people died in America.
From
And I say,
COVID, you're
oh,
saying? No, from
no,
this.
from this. In
Ah,
2009, we had one of the best, quote unquote, influenza seasons with the H1N1 outbreak. And we had Tamiflu. It was
right.
ready. It's like, well, how did Tamiflu work against this novel influenza virus in 2009? Well, now it's coming back around again. But you and I have been looking at the reports from the WHO showing it started last summer. It started last summer in Chile, in Peru, in Brazil, in Australia. We saw the outbreak, and then we watched it spread to the northern hemisphere and Croatia and Serbia and other countries that you and I have been tracking and looking at. So we've watched it track, and then as soon as coronavirus showed up, they stopped tracking influenza.
Yeah.
But now
I
it's
think the
back.
WHO would be better served to put Roger Daltrey back in charge.
At least. I mean, even Peter Townsend at this point might be an improvement.
Yeah.
But the big story in the news right now in the United States is that the United States is peaking, and that there's more cases overnight in the United States than there have been. Right, so the United States is kind of not flattening the curve, so to speak,
Well,
if we're
but isn't
looking
it
at
true, John, that
cases.
when they say cases, that's just a positive test? We don't know if the person is actually showing symptoms or becoming sick, recovering or not recovering. I mean, this is sort of a meaningless
True,
statistic.
exactly. I mean, really, what you want to know is how many people are dying or have died. And we're now at 125,000 people, 130,000 people, based on what time of day it is right now. So you're between 125 and 130,000 people dead in the United States at this point. So, but yes, they're doing more testing. So yes, there's going to be more cases. But at the end of the day, more people died in Texas one day this week, and more people died in Arizona one day this week. It was like 57 died in Texas and 80 something died in Arizona. And those are peak numbers for those states. And California's been having peak numbers. So if these states are having these peaks, and the peaks are now, why didn't Dr. Fauci tell everybody that 4 weeks ago when there was all this protesting and rioting and looting and all that kind of stuff? Why didn't Dr. Fauci say, hey guys, we're not out of the woods here. We're expecting other states to start peaking in 4 weeks. Why didn't we hear that from Dr. Birx?
I think they wanted everybody to destroy the cities and lose confidence in law enforcement.
It kind of makes you wonder whose team they're on, doesn't it?
I have already decided, as have most of our viewers. A lot of these states look like they're kind of, I mean, again, everyone is going to say, and I'm going to agree, that these numbers are somewhat meaningless. I mean, these are cases. We need to examine the number of cases per test or something like that, and the number of symptomatic patients per positive test, and the number of people who exhibit symptoms but never get actually sick enough to be hospitalized,
Let me
and the
give you
number of
simple.
people who actually die from it.
Let me give you simple. Right now in New Zealand, there's 22 people dead. Okay, in New Zealand. And that's through the whole cycle of this thing, right? That's through the whole last 6 months, from January through the end of June, now beginning in July. So through the 6-month window, they've got 22 people dead in New Zealand.
Whoa, this map sucks, man. I can never.
You'll find New Zealand off the eastern coast of Australia. Yeah.
Oh, I know where New Zealand is. This thing just
there
doesn't
you
work.
Go. Yeah, the zoom's weird for you. And then finding the red dots is tricky. But if you go to active cases on the bottom, there's a series of tabs. The second tab says active cases above the 188 number. Yep. And so when you click on that, active cases, now, if you zoom out a little bit, you should get just one dot for New Zealand if you zoom out. And it should be like a yellow dot or something.
I mean, this map sucks, dude.
Yeah, it does. All right, but the net of it is there's 22 people dead in New Zealand. There's 104, 105 dead in Australia. Total for the 6-month run of this thing, right?
But yet Andrew Cuomo thinks he's a genius.
Well, and when you hear an overnight number from Texas that 57 people died in Texas, that's 2.5 times what they did in New Zealand over a 6-month period, and Texas had that overnight. And the point is that Fauci and Birx had a running start. It's not like we didn't lock these cities down. It's not like we didn't shutter all these restaurants and do all that. Did we do it the same exact moment that they did it in Japan or South Korea? Maybe not. But was that the only difference?
We had a first-hand report from Jared Beck just last night. He's with his wife and family in South Korea, where Elizabeth was born. And he's telling us that it's actually pretty common for people to walk around with face masks in Korea and China and Japan. But the restaurants are all open, and when everybody's in there, they're sitting next to each other, going to karaoke bars, taking the masks off once they're inside and all that. So a lot of contradictory, things that people are seeing. We're getting close to the end of time for the show here, John. Do we want to continue with this?
Yeah, just pop through. Yeah, so Sweden is also peaking right now. So Sweden's peaking.
But didn't the public health minister in Sweden say that this is a mistake, that they're reporting it incorrectly?
Possibly. So let's go to the next page. So page down. Israel is peaking. Okay. And this I found interesting, which is we talked last week about how remdesivir was basically a failure. it turned out to be not effective against Ebola,
Hmm.
and was basically going to get jettisoned as worthless, written down, worthless. And then miraculously, it worked against coronavirus, and
Ah.
is $4,000 for a regimen versus hydroxychloroquine, which the World Health Organization stopped testing. The CDC doesn't recommend it anymore.
Well, it's like 40
Uh,
cents.
well, yeah, it's a little more than that, but
$8.
it's not $4,000.
Yeah.
And again, Gilead was in on the whole development of remdesivir for Ebola with Fauci, and they got the nod, not our friend, the Chinese doctor up at Winnipeg. Their product was pushed aside because they weren't part of the clique. And Gilead got the nod. And then after the fact, they said, it's not really that effective. All right. So here's the fatalities in Texas. And everybody's freaking out about Texas, and Texas is hot, and Texas is setting new records, and everybody's sick in Texas. In the 2017-2018 influenza season,
Yeah.
when 80,000 people died in the United States, 10,000 died in Texas.
It's a lot.
10,000 people. The Dallas Cowboys didn't stop playing football. Right? The Houston Texans didn't stop playing football. Everybody still did their thing, and 10,000 people died. I didn't hear anything about it. 2017-2018 influenza season was this was happening right as we had the Las Vegas shooting. October
Yeah.
1st is the beginning of influenza season. So the day of the shooting was the beginning of the worst influenza season in history, or in recent history, since 68, I think, and 80,000 people died. This is Texas, 57 new fatalities overnight. So when I look at a number like that, I'm like, wait a second, that's half of Australia. Australia has 105 people dead
Hmm.
over a 6-month run, and Texas has half that overnight. Okay,
It's hard
something's
to imagine.
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, somebody needs to pick up the phone and talk to Australia and say, what the heck are you guys doing over there? What are we doing wrong? Are we not wearing the right masks? Are
Well,
we
maybe
closing restaurants
wearing the
incorrectly?
masks could be doing it.
Or did you guys use hydroxychloroquine? What is the secret? Why
You ever
is it that
tasted
we have,
kangaroo?
yeah, I mean, why do we have more people dead in 2 days in Texas than they have in 6 months in all of Australia? It just, Arizona, same thing. Arizona, 88 people died overnight before Pence comes to visit Arizona. If you scroll down in the article just a tiny bit, you'll see the state logged a bunch of new infections and 88 deaths overnight. So I'm looking at 88. I'm like, that's 4 times New Zealand in one day. How much does Fauci suck that he's got 4 times as many people dead
We've only got about two
overnight?
minutes left, John.
All right,
Sorry to
all right,
rush you, but we do
all
need to
right.
make the transition over to Patreon and Subscribestar slash I am John Cullen and Patreon and Subscribestar slash Crowdsource the Truth. So let's wrap it up here in just a minute, and then we'll get into detail on all of this and more during the sponsor exclusive segment.
You bet. Well, I put out 3 videos this week, and in the 3 different videos, I'm looking at a number of different stories in the news, and this is one of them. We have been peaking. Sweden supposedly is peaking. Israel's peaking. Peaking in Texas, peaking Arizona, California. Now they're saying Nevada, Idaho are all peaking now. And yet, you remember all these field hospitals?
Yeah,
You remember
I've
the
been over
field
there.
hospitals? All right. And what about the next one? Let's go to the next page real quick. Right? There were field hospitals all over the country. Boston, St. Louis, Chicago, Sacramento. Why did we put them all away? if we're peaking now.
Yeah.
So it seems like if now the hospitals are struggling and we're talking about availability in rooms, uh, why did we put these away, Dr. Fauci? Wasn't that hasty? Maybe, right? And then
Yeah, of course.
finally, all right, finally, the World Health Organization admitted that China never really reported the coronavirus outbreak to them, which
So,
begs the question, then how did the World Health Organization find out about it?
right. How did they
It
get all those
if it
numbers?
who informed them of the outbreak if it wasn't China? Was it somebody's intelligence organization?
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. But it wasn't China. And the WHO has now said, yep, it wasn't China.
Wow.
Was it Bill Gates? Was it Melinda? I don't know. Who called?
Could be.
Somebody called the WHO. I don't know. Who
Yeah.
called the WHO? I have no idea, but it wasn't China. It's
Right.
fascinating stuff. I'm looking forward to
Absolutely.
our patron only show because we're going to get into the meat house and the meat locker, and
Yeah.
it's
So,
it's scary.
and we're going to head there right now. We need just a few minutes for people to be able to join us over on Patreon and Subscribestar / I am John Cullen, or Patreon and Subscribestar / Crowdsource the Truth. I want to also remind people to subscribe to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. We do all these videos as simulcasts on John's channel, but he's also got a huge array of video content on there that people are going to find really interesting. A lot of work about Las Vegas, a lot of work about the coronavirus, and it's a great YouTube channel for people to check out. John, I'll see you in just about 2 minutes on Patreon and Subscribestar, and we'll see everybody there.
Looking
Thanks
forward
for
to it.
watching.